Hi. So, Washington state history has some pretty great characters. And I think my favorite hero of them all would probably be John McLoughlin. So, I'm going to call this John McLoughlin a hero story. So, what makes him a hero? Well, he started off as a French Canadian fur trapper, and he was incredibly smart. He learned numerous Indian languages and he studied medicine, and he became a doctor. He was hired to work at different fur trading posts. And he kept getting promoted everywhere he went. John McLoughlin rose up through the ranks of the Hudson's Bay Company. And life was hard. It was rough on these fur trading outposts. You had to be mean and tough to handle the unruly trappers. There were rival fur trading companies that sometimes, it's like they would break out in war with each other. McLoughlin was involved in some of these conflicts early in his career. So eventually, though, they commissioned him to build Fort Vancouver and run it in the 1820s. And so McLoughlin became the most important man for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, most important white man for hundreds of miles in any direction. So, as a medical doctor, John McLoughlin instituted a plan to vaccinate all of the natives from smallpox. And I don't know if you guys, how much you know about smallpox, but it made COVID look like the sniffles. It wiped out whole populations of Native Americans all across the country, but it never really hammered the natives here. And I think that John McLoughlin's vaccine program maybe played a part in that. So what they did have here was what they called the intermittent fever. And historians now believe that this was the African disease malaria, which is kind of weird if you think about like ships would have had to have come from Africa somehow into the Columbian. And that's the trading networks there are pretty interesting. Anyway, malaria wiped out upwards of 80% of the Kalapuyan people, despite McLoughlin's best efforts. And it probably would have been worse, but he gave them quinine, and he used it to treat hundreds of natives and American settlers and his own people to save them. He actually got in trouble with the Hudson's Bay Company for using these scarce medicines to treat settlers and Indians. Anyway, so there's a lot of stories I could tell you about John McLoughlin, but the one I picked for today that really explains why I admire him concerns his wife. So John McLoughlin, right? He's like 6'5", maybe 6'4", 6'5". He's a giant, tough, educated man, and he adored his wife, Marguerite Wadin. And he would open the door for her. He would pull the chair out for her. People wrote about this. They said that he treated her like she was the Queen of England, and she's like less than 5 feet tall. You know, he's 6'5", and so he absolutely loved his wife so much that contemporaries noticed this. So remember, John McLoughlin worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, which was British. And something to know about the British is that they're different from the United States at the time. We have separation of church and state. And the British, they never had that. They had an official state church, the Church of England, the Anglican Church. So the Church of England is an official part of the British government. And John McLoughlin, right, he'd been running Fort Vancouver for over 10 years and things were going pretty well. And the British then decided that Fort Vancouver needed a government minister. So they send out this guy named Herbert Beaver. So I've read some of Beaver's letters, and I can tell you that he was racist against Indians. He wrote that it was wrong for McLoughlin to give precious medicine to treat the Indians. He said that it was a waste to use the quinine on them, and he literally wrote that he should let them die. I can also tell you that John McLoughlin and Herbert Beaver did not like each other at all. So when Beaver came to Fort Vancouver and saw McLoughlin doting over his Indian wife, she was an Ojibwa, he publicly questioned the legitimacy of their marriage. So John and Marguerite were married on the frontier, where there were no Anglican ministers for thousands of miles. So they wouldn't have like an official Church of England marriage. And so Beaver said they weren't really married at all. It was illegitimate. Then he went on to call Marguerite a female of notoriously loose character. So McLoughlin, he calls this minister, this government official from England, into his office. We don't know exactly what he said to him in there, but we do know that he grabbed him by the collar, dragged him out, He dragged him out to the center of the fort at the yard, and he publicly beat him with his cane in front of lots of witnesses. And so that and a lot of other reasons is why I believe that John McLoughlin does deserve the statue that they have to him in Oregon City. He is really one of the great heroes in history.